Hello, and welcome back to The Critique. Today, we're looking at the narrative for the New Zealand Indian Central Association Centennial Celebration.
A huge milestone, 100 years.
It is. And the material we have is factually solid, but it needs a strategic shift to really land with the national audience. So let's jump right in.
I'm ready. My first read-through, the word that came to mind was, well, it was safe. It's respectful, it's accurate, but I'm not sure it grabs anyone who isn't already a member.
That's the perfect place to start, and that leads directly to our first big point. The material does a great job of establishing the internal significance, but it misses this crucial opportunity to frame the centennial as a win for New Zealand's identity as a whole, not just a community anniversary.
That's the hurdle, isn't it? It tells us why it matters to the association. It's their 100th birthday. Of course it matters.
Right.
But the gap for me is why it matters to everyone else. I'm seeing phrases like unified national voice for Indians.
And integration of the Indian community.
Exactly. And look, historically, that is 100% accurate. That's what the NZICA did.
No one's disputing that.
But the weakness here is that in today's world, that framing can accidentally create a bit of a them versus us dynamic.
I think that's precisely it. It positions the centennial as an event for the Indian community that others can sort of observe,
From the sidelines, yeah.
rather than a milestone we all share in New Zealand's growth into a multicultural society. I mean, the text mentions restrictive immigration policies, which is powerful stuff.
It is.
But it doesn't quite take that next step and explicitly credit the NZICA with helping the entire country move past those eras.
It almost reads like the NZICA was a beneficiary of a changing New Zealand, rather than one of its architects. It's like they're drawing a circle around themselves and celebrating inside of it.
Exactly. So the suggestion is pretty straightforward. Reframe that journey from exclusion to participation as a service the NZICA performed for the whole nation.
I like that.
Position the NZICA not just as an advocate for Indians, but as a guardian of New Zealand's values. Fairness, inclusion, a fair go.
That totally changes the emotional stakes. So, a concrete example. Instead of just saying the event honors the journey,
You could say something like, celebrating 100 years of helping build a more inclusive Aotearoa.
yeah, that's much stronger. It makes them the architect.
Let's look at the numbers they mention. The 350,000 people. Right now, that's just a statistic. It shows scale.
Mm-hmm.
To make it relevant, you have to link that demographic weight to things a non-Indian Kiwi interacts with every single day.
That makes sense. I was thinking, how do you answer the question, how has the NZICA made New Zealand better for a Pākehā farmer or a Pasifika teacher?
Yes, answer that question in the text.
For instance, their work on retail safety. That doesn't just benefit Indian dairy owners, it benefits every single shopkeeper.
Every single one. That's the key. You shift the reader from being an observer to a stakeholder in the NZICA's success. It's not just their birthday, it's our shared victory.
It moves them from an interest group to a civic leader. But, sticking with the history for a second, there's another disconnect that I saw.
I think I know where you're going, which brings us to point 2. The connection between the hawkers and laborers of 1926 and the retail safety advocacy of today. It's there, but it needs a much stronger thematic bridge.
That's it. You get these really powerful, evocative images of the 1926 founders. Real hardship, real grit.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few paragraphs later, you get this list of modern issues. Retail safety, restorative justice, immigration fairness. It almost feels like two different organizations.
It does, and that's the weakness. It's presented as a laundry list under why the centenary matters now.
Right.
There's no narrative thread tying the grit of the pioneers to the civic leadership of today. It feels more like a resume than a story.
It's kind of like, we did this then, and now we do this. But it doesn't really explain how the spirit of that original hawker informs the policy of today's justice advocate.
Exactly. So the suggestion here is to create a theme. Let's call it a legacy of resilience.
Ooh, I like that.
Define the NZICA's brand of advocacy through that lens. Show that the same spirit that helped those early settlers just to survive is now being applied to solve complex national problems.
That's really smart. It turns the history into a tool for the present. So, for an example, you could draw a direct line, something like,
Just as we fought for the right to trade in 1926, today we fight for the safety of every shopkeeper in 2026.
Yes, that's so clear.
You make the struggle of the past the strength of the present. And take that restorative justice point. Instead of just listing it, frame the NZICA as a thought leader in that space.
Because of their history.
Precisely.
The early settlers had to figure out how to resolve conflicts without any state support. They became masters of community cohesion.
It answers the why now question so much better. It's not just we're 100 years old, it's we're 100 years wise.
Okay, so let's move on to the event itself. At the Kiri Tikanawa Theater, it all sounds very proper.
Very dignified, prestigious cultural venue. Dignitaries.
Ceremonial acknowledgments.
And that's our third critique point. The description of the event relies way too much on prestige signaling instead of experiential appeal.
Prestige signaling. That's a great term for it. It honestly sounds a bit like a board meeting in a very fancy theater.
And that's the weakness. It's dignified, sure, but it risks sounding elitist. Maybe even a bit exclusionary, especially to younger people or the general public.
Totally.
The program points, ceremonial acknowledgments, keynote addresses. They just sound so dry. It doesn't answer the basic question, why should I buy a ticket or even care about the live stream?
Yeah, if I read ceremonial acknowledgments, my brain translates that to long speeches. I'm thinking, I'll just catch the highlights on social media later.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to inject some real vitality, some emotion into the description. You don't have to lose the dignity.
Right.
Just shift the focus from the status of the venue to the spectacle and emotion of the experience.
So how do you do that, practically?
Well, instead of just listing cultural performances, describe them as a vibrant retelling of a century-long story. Make it sound like a show, not a recital.
Okay, I see. And what about the launch of Centennial Heritage Records? That sounds historically massive, but on paper, it's a bit of a snooze.
Right? So don't frame it as a bureaucratic release. Frame it as unveiling the hidden stories of the pioneers who helped build our cities.
I like that.
You want to promise an emotional journey, pride, tears maybe, celebration. You're not asking them to witness a procedure. You're inviting them to feel the weight of history.
So you're answering my question, is this a board meeting or is this a gala of national pride?
Exactly. Make it feel like if you miss this night, you're missing a once-in-a-lifetime moment for the nation.
That brings me to my next thought, which is, who is this all for? We've talked about the pioneers, we've talked about the leadership, but I see a section here called Looking to the Next Century.
Yes, and that's critique point number 4. That looking to the next century section is probably the most critical part for future relevance,
And it's buried at the very end of the document.
diminishing all of its impact.
It really does. It's like the document is saying, here's 95 years of amazing history, and oh, by the way, we also have a plan for the future. It feels like an afterthought.
That's the structural weakness. By putting the youth and future focus last, the whole narrative feels backward-looking. Things like investment in youth spaces and leadership development get treated like footnotes.
Instead of headlines.
Here.
The people who are going to carry this for the next 100 years are 20 years old right now, and they're in the appendix.
So the suggestion is flip the whole hierarchy.
Start with the future.
Start the why it matters section with the future. Frame this whole centennial not as the end of 100 years, but as the launch of the next 100.
Wow. The launch. That's a powerful pivot.
It is. So for an example, you could position the event itself as the day the next century begins.
I love that.
Instead of just acknowledging where we came from, you phrase it as using our history to fuel our future leaders.
And you could build on that. The text says investment in youth spaces. What if you framed it as creating New Zealand's future civic leaders?
Absolutely. Emphasize that the NZICA is an incubator for talent that benefits the whole country, not just the association. That's a dynamic, forward-looking message.
It stops the centennial from feeling like a retirement party. It makes a 100-year-old organization feel young.
Exactly. Okay, so for our final point today, let's talk about tone and style, the actual words being used.
I was struck by how institutional it all sounds. Umbrella body, coordinated network, affiliated branches. It reads a bit like a grant application.
That is the heart of our 5th critique point. The language is effective at conveying stability, which is good,
Sure.
but it needs to pivot to human-centric storytelling to really connect emotionally.
It paints a picture of a bureaucracy, not a living, breathing community. It creates this barrier for anyone outside the organization who connects with stories, not org charts.
So how do we fix that without making it sound flimsy or disorganized?
We don't want that.
The suggestion is simple. Humanize the hierarchy.
Humanize the hierarchy. Okay.
Every time you make a structural point, you immediately pair it with a human outcome.
Okay, let's try one. The text calls it an umbrella body for Indian associations. Dry.
Very dry. A concrete fix would be to supplement that with something like a family of families stretching from Northland to Invercargill.
Oh, that's so much better. Family of families. It conveys the same structure, but it implies warmth and connection.
And instead of saying the event mirrors the structure of the NZICA,
Say it mirrors the heartbeat of local communities.
heartbeat versus structure. That's the choice right there. And when you mention the attendees, dignitaries, elected representatives,
You need to balance that.
balance it by also mentioning the families of the original pioneers. Ground the high-level event in personal, relatable history. It reminds everyone this organization is made of people.
The common thread through all 5 of these points, really, is about breaking down that us and them barrier.
That's the perfect summary. So, to recap for our listener, the source material is a rock-solid foundation. The facts are there, the history is there,
It's strong.
but to make this centennial story really resonate, the narrative has to pivot from being an internal celebration to a national milestone.
You need to draw that bright, clear line from the grit of the 1926 hawkers to the civic leadership of 2026. Show that the struggle has evolved into a service for all of New Zealand.
Exactly. Connect that history to modern issues like retail safety, inject real emotion into the event description so it doesn't sound like a stuffy ceremony.
And bring the future to the front. Don't hide the youth at the back. Frame this whole thing as a launch pad for the next century of leaders.
And finally, just soften that corporate language. Make it human. Family of families, not umbrella body. If these changes are made, this narrative won't just inform people about the event. It'll inspire them to actually care about it.
It transforms the document from an announcement into an invitation.
And that brings us to the end of this critique. Thank you so much for submitting this. It's a hugely important milestone. And with a few of these narrative shifts, we think it can have a truly significant national impact.
We'd love to see how it evolves.
We invite you to make these adjustments and send the revised draft back to us for a final polish. Until next time, keep refining your work.